good.
Even better than before.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, it couldn't be any worse, right?
That's right. That's right. So we're getting started. How about this, Mike? We're here. It's starting now. So now that my dad's not on the video today, he's out of town. I wanted to make sure that you and I had a more back and forth, intimate thing. And what I'm most curious about, Mike, so do you mind explaining to me and the rest of the people that are watching what it's like to be a broker? You've got two brokers in the room now. Jerry Murphy is there behind the screen, but you mentioned yesterday, and it's something that kind of hit me. On a slow day, you're going to get 50 questions, little fires that are popping up, some bigger than others. What are those questions like? What is your guiding principle in this job? And what's the real value of having a great broker? I mean, I'm not trying to brown nose you, but I'm just curious about the profession.
Honestly, my view of a broker has changed 180 degrees from when I started. I think the big value is your experience. When I started out as a broker of Downing Frye, I was not aware at that time how little I knew 24 years ago. And so you're the sum of your experiences, the contract issues you have, et cetera. And every day it's on the job training. I'll tell you a true story. I went to lunch one time. I was going 25 minutes, and when I came back, I had 286 emails in 25 minutes. So it's amazing the volume that comes through. And back then, it was more people walking into your office talking with you. It was email. It was text messages. People would leave a message on your home phone, your cell phone, your office phone. So they try to reach you a number of different ways, but the key is you got to solve the problem quickly because you got to move on to the next one. Stress, I got to tell you, when I started with Downing Frye, I slept like a baby. Now sleep is a little harder to come by. But you know, the thing I love about it is the friendships. Every agent that becomes part of Downing Frye, I look at it as a personal friend. And even if they get out of the business, retire, move on, whatever, wherever I run into them, I still look at them as a friend. And that means more to me than almost anything. It's a rewarding business. I've seen many of our agents' kids come in early selling me Girl Scout cookies, and years later, I'm watching them graduate from college. Kind of neat to be a part of that. You know, see them grow up before your eyes. And frankly, Christian, I saw you grow up, you know, and I remember when you were just trying to get that 8th grade diploma.
That's right.
The questions we get are all over the chart. Sometimes it's sales questions, marketing questions. Sometimes it's contract questions. Sometimes it's an arbitration matter that they're debating whether or not to go forward for arbitration or mediation. A wide variety of questions. I mean, really, and you know, most of them you've heard before, but every now and then you get one that you go, you know, that's a good one. I've never had that in 20 some years.
Well, you had a question like that yesterday. I don't remember what the issue was, but you said, I've never gotten that question before. You should call Christian.
Well, the one I walked into you on today was someone wanting to know whether they wanted to be a LLC, a PA, or a sub
Right.
S, and you know, who do you turn them to get advice on that? Is it an attorney? Is it a CPA? Is it their tax preparer? And
Well,
what was your
and
answer?
my answer was that, you know, legally, all of those are sufficient. They're going to create a level of protection around your business and liability, potentially, things like that. So as an attorney, I don't care which one you choose, they all work. But as an accountant, it matters. So every year, new tax laws, new statutes that will affect whether you should be an S corp or a PA or whatever it may be. In fact, in my own business, You know, we made an election to switch from being taxed as a C corp to a partnership. And that was because the taxes were, the laws were no longer favorable. So we had to switch. So that ultimately, you talk to your accountant about that, and then you can always follow up with the attorney. But in that scenario, any one of them would work for me.
Well, another role of the broker, to be quite honest, is, and I hate to put it this way, but you're, you're somewhat like a cheerleader in that being in this business, it's an emotional roller coaster. Uh, Agents are going to have good times when it seems like it's fairly easy business, and they're going to have times where they're doing everything right and yet nothing's working out. And so people will come in and we'll examine what they're doing, and sometimes I can give them advice on some things they might want to try to help spur their business. Sometimes I tell them, look, don't change. You're doing everything right. It will turn. You just don't give up on what works because it's not working. You need to analyze it. And maybe it's the time of year where, what they're doing works most of the year, but maybe out of season, you have to change your tactics a little. So it's an interesting business.
Well, and from my perspective, and this is going to go, someone asked a question, we're going to get to it in just a minute, but when from an outsider's perspective, looking at brokers, I think there are a lot of different types of brokers, different ways of approaching things. You've got, in fact, in your room right now, you've got Jerry Murphy. I wouldn't say the two of you are all that similar. You have a very different style of what kind of support you offer your agents. Mike, you're very involved on the legislative side of things with the state of Florida, lobbying efforts. You're very connected with other local brokers, and you guys bounce ideas off each other. You're an incredible cheerleader of your agents, keeping them stay positive and trying to help them see the silver lining in what they're working on. But then Jerry, if you look at him, he's got a lot of those things, but his huge asset is that he's very knowledgeable about how to sell. He's a great salesman, amazing. And he likes to train. He likes to teach his agents, hey, here's what you need to do. Hey, let's simplify things. You got to learn to sell. That's what we're here for in this business. Not necessarily, technically detailed on contract stuff, but not ignorant to it. And obviously a huge cheerleader, but Jerry, I'm not going to let you talk because, you're behind the screen, but you're an incredible hands-on manager of your agents. Whereas Mike, you're more of like, hey, I'm your support team. Whatever you need, I'm going to do it for you, but I'm going to let you be great. So, and then I've known brokers that are very savvy on the contracts. I know brokers that are attorneys, and they're very technical. You have Mike, you have a broker that works for you that's very technically oriented. She's wonderful and very knowledgeable and a great trainer. None of you are the same. You're all very different, but you each have a role in your company that is necessary.
I
I
think
don't,
if we were all the same, we'd have a problem, to be honest. You need
yeah,
to have different perspectives on things, different areas of expertise.
right.
It's like a real estate team. If you have two real estate team members that do the exact same thing, I don't know that that's good. You want to work off the strengths of each one, and hopefully those strengths are different. It just makes you a more encompassing team. I think the same thing goes with brokers. You need people that specialize in various areas. As you pointed out, I tend to get more involved on the state level and on the board level. Not sure how that worked out that way, but it
Well,
does.
and you're a great recruiter. You're a people person. You like being the face of an organization in that sense. So it's valuable. I've known a lot of brokers that want to be behind the scenes, and they'll answer all the questions. So Deb asked a question: as a newly appointed qualifying broker of a large brokerage in the DC area, they're going to have 75 plus agents right out of the gate. What 1 to 3 pieces of advice would you offer me?
If you get a complaint from public, you'll be horrified what the complaint is. It's so important to get both sides of the story. And it might go the other way. It might be your agent run something by you and you're horrified at what that other real estate company's doing. You always need to get both sides of the story before you determine the course of action.
Did you learn
If
that
you
the hard
rely
way,
on
Mike?
what's that?
Did you learn that the hard way? I certainly have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Uh, and you know, what happens in time is you learn to read people. And my very first week, give you a classic example. My first week, I had a guy come in and wanted to terminate his listing. You know, he said that, you know, his wife was dying of cancer and this and that. It was a horrible story. I said, absolutely. And so we terminated that listing. And then the next day I had a full price, all cash offer come in. And I called him up and I said, good news. You know, we just had a full price, all cash offer come in. And I know your wife's dying of cancer and you wanted to sell your home. Here's the contract. We have it for you. And he kind of hemmed and hawed and said, I just sold it yesterday. So yeah, he pulled one over me, to be honest. And that's sad, but it does happen. And unfortunately, we're dealing with large sums of money. And money sometimes brings out the best and worst in people. You know, you just got to read people, and I try to treat everyone evenly and honestly. And as I get older, it's less likely they're going to pull one on me. Could it happen? Sure, but you do get very good at reading people. So I'd say the first bit of advice is getting all sides of the story before you react to it. The second bit of advice I would have is be honest. It's your reputation means absolutely everything. You don't want a bad reputation in this business. And there are times where you want to tell your agent what they want to hear, but you're doing a disservice to them if you're not telling them what you honestly think. You know, you need to be almost I don't want to say a confident. You need them to look at you as an honest resource. When they turn to you, they might not hear exactly what they want, but they'll get your perspective on it, and hopefully that will be helpful. Third bit of advice is definitely look at how you market and advertise your product. Define your value. As a brokerage firm, define your value. What makes you different than the other hundreds? And I'm from the Washington, D.C. area. So there's some good firms in that town and in the surrounding area. A lot of them are similar, but there are slight differences that make you better. What are those differences? You know, right now, more and more, the realtor community has to define their value. Why should someone list with you? Why should they use you to help them find a home? We have a lot of value. One thing I think the realtor community is bad at is tooting our horn. You know, we have a lot to offer. We just need to do a better job of expressing it to the public because it is a very complicated process. You know, there's a lot of knowledge that goes into a successful transaction. So toot your horn, define your value, determine when you're marketing and advertising how best to do that. Is it through social media? Is it through the Washington Post? Is it through an email campaign? In all likelihood, it's going to be a combination of all the above. You just got to figure out, and particularly just starting out with a business, a lot of times you have more limited resources when you're starting out. So you got to figure out which avenues of marketing give you the best bang for the buck. And then as you become more and more successful, then hopefully the advertising marketing budget increases and you can be a little looser with where you spend that money. But in the beginning, that bang for the buck is so important.
I didn't know I was going to get an answer like that. I'm impressed. That's beautiful. That's
Jerry
incredible.
Murphy was feeding me all the answers.
Good, very smart. Good job. No, I can draw a lot of parallels to being an attorney, being a business owner. I think all those principles apply the same. Being honest and transparent, consistent, seeing the whole picture, seeing your value. I don't think any agent or broker can have any success right out of the gate. I think it's something that you earn and that you have to prove over and over and over again. And attorneys are no different. One of the things I pride myself on is I don't look to see if it's a file that I have or not necessarily. If I'm representing one person or another, if a person asks my opinion, I'm probably going to give it. Depending on what the question is. But you gotta be honest with your agent. You have to be honest with your client. You have to be honest with yourself. And it's a lot easier to be honest if you're doing it consistently. That's
Good
amazing.
point. Hmm.
That's great, Mike. That was an awesome 1, 2, 3. I probably should have asked you to, I'm glad I didn't ask you to prepare for this one. It
Yeah, I
wouldn't have
got
been as
set up
good.
on this one.
Yeah, I set you up on that. Okay, so that's a beautiful intro to some of the other things that we're seeing. One of the first questions I asked you, Mike, is what are the questions you're seeing right now, right? That what are some of these 50 questions that you're getting in a slow day? And I certainly have my own. So I'm going to hit a couple of these, and then Mike, if you have one that you want to point to, like an example, we can get to that in a little bit. But one of the questions I had recently, and I think this is very very normal for our market in Southwest Florida. I was working with a new agent for the first time. He's not new, but our relationship is new. And he said, I never do mortgage deals ever. In my whole career, I've done like 2 or 3, and yet he found himself doing a deal for a first-time home buyer. And he's like, I'm totally fish out of the water. What do we do? Because mortgages are very different. They have all these federal guidelines, the lender guidelines, and then you've got, borrower and seller and property restrictions. You've got all these competing interests, and you have to find your avenue where we can get it closed. So the first thing I'll tell people is there's always an avenue. I don't think I've ever been stumped with a solution that would work for everybody involved. But it can be very difficult, especially if you don't have the experience doing a lot of finance transactions. So here was the issue. Seller had a roof that needed to be repaired. Buyer did a buyer election. Seller agreed to fix the roof. It was like a $6,000 repair. Lenders, first thing, number one, lenders don't want to see problems with a roof. That freaks them out. Problem number two, lenders don't want to see escrows. And, there's problems with the roof, and other problems we have with our neighbor contract specifically is that it mandates money to be put in escrow if it's not done by closing. In other markets where I used to practice, you'd actually have to agree to some sort of escrow. Otherwise, the seller's just in default. But on the neighbor contract, we got, the escrow is the natural. So we had a seller that said, all right, well, I'll just put the $6,000 in escrow. And when the roof gets completed, the money will be used to pay for it. The lender was never going to allow that. It would have triggered the alarm bell of there's a problem with the roof that's not getting done prior to closing. And so the agent I was working with calls the lender based on my suggestion. I said, call the lender and see what options are available. And the lender said something that shocked me, Mike. The lender said, just have the seller pay the buyer directly, $6,000. That's mortgage fraud. You can't do that. That's
Wow.
really, really bad. And I know people do it generally. It's not, but there is a law that prohibits a seller paying a buyer or vice versa and it not being on the settlement statement. It is completely illegal. You cannot do it. The lender could get in trouble, the borrower would get in trouble, the seller get in trouble, the agents get in trouble, and Mike, I hate to break it to you, the broker would get in trouble. It's not okay. Especially when it's $6,000. I've had people, they'll write a $150 check and they just don't tell me about it. That happens. What I don't know, it's hard to find that stuff out. But $6,000, that's a big number. And especially since there was already a buyer election on this roof, that all the paperwork is there to get us in trouble. Not going to work. And so I told the agent that. He goes, well, the lender told me just to have the buyer paid directly. And I said, no, we're not doing that. So here was my solution. It's a little bit of a loophole, it's a workaround. And any lenders that are going to watch this video later, don't yell at me. But what we did is we actually had it on the settlement statement out in the open, and I had the seller paying the roofer directly. So $6,000 payable to Mike Hughes Roofing. And then what I did is I took the money and I gave the check to the buyer. And I said, buyer, use the first $3,000 as the deposit. Here's the check. And then the second check, which is another $3,000, put that in your pocket and wait until the work is completed and then pay the roofer. It's not exactly what a lender wants. They want the roof to be completed prior to closing, but we've at least disclosed it. It's on the CD, it's on the HUD, it's on the settlement statement. And that buyer can't cash that check themselves. It's made out to the roofer. So that was the creative workaround. The agent was thrilled with that solution, and there was no issues with, there was no issues with the buyer and the lender, and they were thrilled. Someone asked, was this an FHA lender? It wasn't. It was a conventional loan. So this was simply something that came up on an inspection. It was not due to an appraisal or otherwise, just came on the inspection. So this could be windows, it could be doors, flooring, any, wood rot, termites, any of these things, they really do need to be solved before closing if there's a lender involved. Would an FHA or a VA loan allow that? Maybe. So on FHA and VA loans, they do a different kind of appraisal, typically, especially on VA loans. VA lenders will have a kind of like an appraisal that looks for safety issues. And if they see that the roof is not done correctly, they're going to want a second appraisal before closing to make sure that that work was completed. Conventional loans and most FHA loans don't have that requirement, so you could probably get away without that second appraisal. VA loans probably wouldn't allow that. Hopefully that answers. That's a crazy question, but I think the crux of the issue, the real learning point on that is, I'm not surprised people down in South Florida don't have experience doing loans. I'm not surprised one bit. Mike, what would you say historically the percentage of mortgage deals is?
Well, what we've seen as a company now, you almost have to throw out the pandemic period because it really skewed things in a weird way. But typically in season, Christmas to Easter, we see more heavy cash as a lot of the wealthy come down here and they tend to pay cash. At a season, a more 55-45 cash versus mortgage. However,
so off
in recent
season,
years,
50-50.
Yeah, at a season. Mortgage fraud, I'm glad you hit that, Christian. That's a serious deal. And I've seen it through the years. Many years ago, there was a big mortgage fraud ring down on Marco Island. I remember that one. And that ring hit a lot of different people. And it's a scary thing. And I'll give you a true story. We had an agent come to me with this guy wanted to do it creatively, which was mortgage fraud. Her commission was going to be $60,000. I told her, walk away from the deal. It's mortgage fraud. She walked away from it, but she was mad at me because she just lost $60,000 and she quit the company. A year later, the front page headline in the Naples Daily News with the FBI had picked that guy up. And she called me that day and she said, Mike, I was upset with you when I quit, but I realized you saved me. And I said, I know that. I said, I crossed paths with that guy 5 years earlier. You always remember the names.
Yeah, so I get that a lot of times in my business. I had a client who wanted a purchase price of 800,000, even though the real purchase price was 700,000. He wanted like $100,000 credit. And what he was trying to do was he was trying to artificially inflate the purchase price so that he could finance all, if not even more than the actual purchase price. So if the lender would give him a $720,000 loan on an $800,000 purchase price, he could pocket 20 grand by buying this property. And that's, it's not necessarily mortgage fraud, but when it smells funny, you got to ask a lot of questions, and you got to make sure everyone's aware, that everyone's been disclosed, that this is the way it is. The lender needs to know, hey, did you know that there's $100,000 credit on here? It can get a little tricky. But that being said, it's not necessarily legal, but you have to be your own advocate. And it goes back to Deb's question about, being a new qualified broker. You're going to be put in these situations where you got to be the bad guy. It's like an everyday occurrence for me.
Jerry Murphy wants to talk. Can he step into the picture?
Please come in. Please.
All right.
Come in. Oh,
Let's
this
see
can
if
be
we can
awkward. You're gonna
tilt
have to
this
put
up
that,
so we
that
can
camera up.
get him in the picture. There we go.
That's beautiful, Mike. Hey,
Words of
Jerry.
wisdom. What's going on,
Let me
Jerry?
do this.
Oh,
So
your camera's gonna
things
mess
are
you up.
getting worse as time goes on with realtors being faced with situations. I learned this statement a long time ago. And there's never a right time to do the wrong thing. Never a right time to do the wrong thing.
True.
That's a little play on what you would normally say,
And you can never be wrong by doing the right thing. And I learned this a long time ago. I mean, just what they said, well, give the roofer the check and not think about what the consequences are and make it seem casual. It's your license. It's criminal and a lot of the activities that we're faced with. So remember, there's never a right time to do the wrong thing.
Good words. Good words. Well spoken.
So Lisa had a question, Mike, when you report the cash numbers, where are you getting that data from? Is it based on the contracts being specified as cash deals, or are you looking at closing statements?
Normally I'm looking at both, to be honest. But I'm always looking at the pending sales, because we have a daily spreadsheet that I get that breaks it out between cash and mortgage. So now, is it possible that someone does a cash deal and then gets a mortgage after it? Yeah, but they better get it done before the closing date.
Yeah.
There's some danger there.
Oh, excuse me. I would normally say that the cash deals is a bigger majority of my closings. In season, it's 80%, maybe 90% of my deals are all cash. And then even off season, it's still 70%, 60%. So on average, I'm seeing 75 to 80% of deals are all cash. And, it all depends on who are your clients. Are we talking about higher end stuff or more of the middle, or lower end stuff? Like you said, are we in a bubble where COVID is inflating the prices and demand is skyrocketed? Or, is inventory low and, we got to get a deal done. So, but I would say over 20 years in this town, you've got a 70, 80% cash rate generally. And so if you have that over a 20-year period, it's no wonder that we're not very good at them. Alternatively, when I was practicing elsewhere, it was incredibly unusual to have a cash deal. Maybe 5% of the time it was a cash deal. Everything else was finance. So I got very good at doing finance deals and really good at VA and FHA addendas and how you kind of work these credits. You get told no enough, you tend to learn what the creative solution is. And that's no different with anything. It's no different with inspections. How many inspections have you done? Have you ever seen it? And then if we go to the next topic I wanted to hit, Mike, probate. So I had an agent come in last week. He had 3 listings that all had probate included on them. And he told me, he goes, in 23 years, I've never had one. And now I have 3. So I tried to assure him, I said, even if you had one a year, you still wouldn't be good at this. It takes a lot to get good at this kind of rhythm. So in those scenarios, what I'm telling you is your job is to notice the issues, not to necessarily have the solution. Lean on your brokers, lean on your attorneys, lean on me, let me help. But lean on the people that do know, that do have that experience, and then double check it and empower your clients to make decisions based on that information. Probate is tricky, and it really depends. You have to look at the data. So I want to show something to everybody, and this is, I think, a very valuable way to go about this. Mike, can you see my internet
Yep,
browser? Okay.
yep.
So we're going to go to the Collier County Appraiser website. So what a lot of people do when they're researching a closing, or they're trying to put a property under a listing, or maybe make an offer, is they usually rely on the MLS information. And they're going to log in there, and whatever MLS has for the seller, that's what they're going to put. Whatever the MLS has for legal description, that's what they're going to put. And I'm going to ask you, go one step further. Don't rely on MLS. Go straight to the county websites. You've got a Collier County Property Appraiser. You've also got the Lee County. So it's Lee, PA for the appraiser website in Lee County. Obviously, every county is going to have the same thing. But we're going to search myself here. And, we know my address, or I know my address. You pop it in, and it's going to have my name listed as the owner. It's going to have my legal. This is what I would put in your contract. It's considered a short legal. Interestingly, this is not a sufficient legal description to use on a deed. A lot of clients that try and do deeds themselves, they'll use this and cause themselves a lot of problems. So not that you need to be too worried about that, but you can use this for your legal description on the sales contract. But here's the real amazing part of this website is you can go right to the deed. And this is what I would ask you to do when getting a new listing or making an offer on a new property. It's going to have the actual deed. All I did was click the link, and it matches to the Collier County Clerk of Courts, and it has who the actual owners are. So Christian Neil Ross and Jessica R. Ross, husband and wife. And if you go to a listing appointment and you don't see both of us, you got to ask the question. And, you can't tell on this particular file, but you can tell, if you've got.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it, Christian. I'm
There
just
it
seeing
is. Is that any
emails.
better, Mike? Is that any better?
All right, there you go. Perfect.
Yeah, when I opened the new screen, it didn't do it correctly. So in this one, you've got my name as the grantee. So Christian Neil Ross and Jessica R. Ross, husband and wife. So husband and wife is really important because it shows that we have tenants by the entirety. So if I were to pass away, my wife gets this property without having to go through probate. So if you ask me, hey, on this deal, Christian's passed away, it'd be a weird scenario. But we ask Mike, hey, Mike, Christian passed away, who do I need to sign? He's going to pull up the deed, and he's going to see that they're husband and wife, and that all we need is Jessica to sign, and we're good. We're okay. Alternatively, if both of us have passed away, well, there's no one else listed here, which means we now know we're dealing with probate. And then another scenario is, what if it's in a trust? If it's in a trust, we can look at this and we got to see, all right, who's the trustee? And, is that who I'm talking with? And then we may need to see a copy of the trust, or is there what we call trust powers on the deed? It gets very complex, but it always starts at the front end. Open the deed, download it, and just look at it. In the very least, bring it with you to a listing appointment, and then start asking questions. Hey, I noticed that Christian's on here. Where is he? And then my wife would have to tell you that she buried me in the backyard. Now we have some research to do. And so in those scenarios, it goes back to what I was saying before. Lean into people that can help you in those, because you shouldn't be expected to know the answers on some of this. It gets complex. But go one step further. So if you learned anything today, after Mike's rambling, go straight to the source. It can be helpful.
All right, let me ask you this. Let me ask you
please.
this, Christian. You're in a car accident. You pass away.
Okay.
The listing was originally signed to sell your house. You signed it, your wife signed it. So now you passed away. Do they have to do anything with the listing because now one of the signers is no longer on it?
No, Probably not. So it
Right.
depends which listing agreement you signed. It depends if you changed anything or maybe you made mistakes, but generally any of these contracts are going to they call it, it's going to apply to any heirs, any successors in title. So if I agree to sell my house to you, and then I die, I get hit by a bus, or I sell it to someone else before you can close, you can sue me and say, hey, we had a deal. And the listing agent can sue as well. The listing agent can say, hey, we had a deal. You were supposed to let me sell it. You weren't supposed to die. What are you doing? And so any of the heirs would be bound by that listing agreement. Any successor trustees would be bound by that listing agreement. So you're protected in that sense. So I have had clients who've passed away during a listing or during a contract, and we just have to kind of readjust, see where the dust settles, and account for who the new trustee is, the executor or personal representative. And there might be a delay. The reality of it is that you might have to put your listing on hold. You might have to extend the contract, but we just, there is a process for all of that.
All right, let me give you another wrinkle. Let's say
Good.
Christian Ross owns a house by himself when he was a bachelor. He wasn't married. Christian Ross passes away, car accident. The question I get periodically from our agents is, okay, now someone approaches them about listing that property for sale. How do they know they have the right person signing that listing agreement? I get that frequently.
It's a great question. And you start again by going to the deed. So let's say we go to that again. I'm going to go to the whole screen. This way I can't mess it up again. All right, so we have that same question. Let's say I've passed away and my wife is not on title. It's just me. But the wife calls and says, Mike, I want you to sell the house. Well, you got, based on what I was telling you before, you pull the deed that says, wait a second, you're not on here. What happened there? And you say, what? And usually what happens in that scenario is the spouse just didn't know. Oh, I just assumed I was on there. I didn't know. Or, oh, goodness, I forgot. But if you didn't do the research, we would be in a little bit of trouble. We might be doing things before we got to what we really needed to do. So maybe in this exact scenario, what I would do is I would look to see, is he married now? Or when he passed away, was he married? So in my scenario, I'm married, I get hit by a car, and my wife, she's my surviving spouse. We are married, but the deed says we're not, at least at the time. I'm going to look at the trim notice, which is the estimated taxes, and I'm going to look to see if I had homestead on this property. So does Christian have homestead on the property? Well, when it's your homesteaded property, a spouse has rights to that house, even if they're not on title. In fact, Mike, I did a deal this morning, and the husband had to sign one paper. They had to sign the deed. They didn't have to sign anything else because they're not on title, but because it's their homesteaded property, the spouse needed to sign. The wife signed everything else. It was her property, but the spouse needed to sign the deed because they were married. So in that scenario, the wife probably is the beneficiary. And if it's a homestead, we definitely need, in the very least, we need her help because she's going to sign something. And in the most, she might be the sole owner of this property. But we're going to need probate. We're going to need to go through the Collier County clerk or whatever county we're in. Somewhere in Florida, we're going to need it probated so that the judge tells us who we need to deal with. The will is interesting, right? The will tells us who the deceased wanted to represent them or represent their estate, but the judge has to sign off on it. So Mike, let's kill you in this scenario. You die and you leave a piece of property or, whatever it may be. Your will says that I'm the trustee or I'm the personal representative. That's good information, but it's not the full picture. We need the judge to sign off on it. So you really shouldn't try to sell the house or the property until the judge has approved it.
It's kind of a wild area because what I've had through the years is the last parent passes away, and then one of the kids approaches you about listing the property for sale. And that gets a little dicey when there's multiple kids. because they don't always agree with each other. And so you get into, okay, well, am I dealing with the right person?
It's very dicey, and the sad part is that because it's dicey, you can also get varying levels of opinions, and that can really mess you up. I was on a call yesterday with another attorney who felt differently. He wasn't seeing the whole, in my opinion, he wasn't seeing the whole picture. He was seeing a very limited scope. So in that scenario, and I'll try not to bore everybody, the property was owned in trust. There was a trustee that was named. The trustee wanted to sell, but they wanted to use a power of attorney to sell. So the son was going to sign on behalf of the dad as trustee. And so the other attorney was like, oh, that's easy, no problem, we're fine, you know. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, what does the power of attorney look like? Is it sufficient for the state that it was drafted in? That's the minimum standard. Is it enough in Delaware or Maryland or wherever where it was drafted? And if it's enough, that's good. But if it's homestead, even though it's in trust, I need them to sign individually and as trustee. And it's just kind of, and the other attorney wasn't seeing that. He's like, oh, the trust is fine. The POA is fine. I'm like, but they need to sign individually, which means the POA was not fine. It needed to be sufficient for Florida standards. It was like a whole nother level. And so even two attorneys were disagreeing over it. I think I'll be proven right on that one, but it might take a minute. He wasn't very happy with me. And then this morning I was on a call with Canadian attorneys, and they're worried about FERPTA. And they've got their own tax issues in Canada. They're trying to match them with their tax issues in the US. And they're going to have two FERPTA events, just trying to get the property from one owner to another. They're going to pay over $500,000 in FERPTA withholding just to transfer it amongst brothers. It's a disaster. It's complex. And I don't know all the answers on things like this, but we can start problem solving one thing at a time. It's a mess. It's messy. Anything else? Any other words of wisdom for us, Mike?
No, actually, anytime I hear the word FERPTA, I turn to your dad. I mean, I walk right down the hallway.
We get very good at things like FERPTA, FinCEN requirements. We get very good at trust. We get really good because we see it every day, every single day. It's not because we're all that much smarter than anybody else. It's because we have the reps. So to that extent, I think agents and brokers, they have to find their rhythm and get really good at a select number of things. I think if you try and do too much, you're not going to be good at any of it. So try and keep it simple, redo, reuse. And if it's something outside of your purview, get people to help, get some sort of team together and empower your clients to make the right decision. So we'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Jerry. I don't think he's there anymore, but thank you.
No, he's here. We're hiding him.
I love it. It's never the right time to do the wrong thing. Love it. All right. Bye, guys. Thank you.
Take care.